Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old Fourth Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
And a happy weekend. Yes, we are here, thankfully. What a long week. It has been a crazy week. July has been nuts. 2024, kind of crazy. But honestly, the lead story this morning, I know we should be talking about the Trump acceptance speech, and we will, don't get me wrong, but you may be awaking to some issues with, I don't know, your flights, maybe your own computer, the TV station you watch. There is a huge CrowdStrike outage impacting just about everybody. This is not just an American issue. This is being felt across the globe. CNN with the news this morning.
We're returning now to breaking news that we're following, the global cyber outages that have caused delays and issues at European airports affecting travel, the media, and the London Stock Exchange website, among other things. And it seems likely that list is growing by the minute. Nigel Fair is a professor of cybersecurity at Monash University, and he joins us from Canberra in Australia. Sir, first of all, what do you make of all this? That this is taking on such a global dimension? I know Australia is pretty affected as well.
Absolutely. Australia's been heavily affected by that, and it's just coming to the close of our day on Friday. And a lot of organisations have not been able to function. We're talking our big major banks, our airports, airliners, all across the whole critical infrastructure sector has been affected. Either no internet connectivity or very limited availability.
How long do you think something like this could take? I know that Microsoft says that they've identified the problem, I guess. They don't believe that there was any malicious activity going on. How long is this going to go on, do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, you know, it's good that at this stage it's not being detected as malicious. But, you know, we need to take an all hazards approach to the online environment when it comes to risk management. I'm going to say, I think in the next 12 hours, most organisations will get some connectivity back, but I think we're realistically looking at early next week for a full recovery of systems.
Two things I will point out. The first, I checked to make sure that America One Radio was working as it normally would, so that I wouldn't be producing my show in vain for it not to air. Point number one. Point number two, this show is produced on an Apple MacBook, and I used to be real hesitant to embrace the Mac culture. Actually, I was probably amongst the pioneers back in high school when those large box Macs came out. Remember those? We were well versed on those bad boys when I was in high school because we used them to put together our high school newspaper. We used Aldous PageMaker. I don't even know if that program still exists, but it was a really good one back in the day. I got real good on the Mac back then. Anyway, since then, of course, we all became Microsoft drones, and just about every computer out there that obviously isn't created by Apple, it comes with Microsoft, some version of Windows. So like many of you, I got very used to the way any Windows-based program works. And then about 5 years ago, getting back into real estate and realizing that I'm going to do some podcast and video production and whatnot on the side, I took the leap and got this MacBook. And it took me a minute to realize that this thing functions a lot like my trusty iPhones over the years have, but in a different way, obviously with the keyboard and the mouse and all that stuff. Suffice to say, I'm pretty happy with the decision I made. And not just today, but I mean, we've all seen the blue screen of death. We've all sat there at the mercy of updates that could take minutes to hours, and grateful I don't have to deal with any of that. Here's what else I don't have to deal with. I don't have to deal with being the person who fact-checked a Donald Trump speech. My goodness, what a job that is. And first, let me just say, last night he accepted the nomination for the Republican Party's ticket to be featured in November atop your presidential ballots when you get the opportunity to vote in November. And the first few minutes, I have to admit, eloquent, moving even, and in a tone that made me think, okay, this guy's been deeply affected by not only being shot at, but also the loss of life at his rally for the retired fireman, Mr. Comparator. Even touching that, they brought out his jacket and fire department helmet. had it there on stage. A lot of folks noting that Comparator's last name misspelled. That apparently was by design. Apparently, the story goes, there's only so much room for letters on the back of the jacket, and there wasn't enough room for all the letters of his last name. Interesting. I mean, I've seen this with baseball uniforms, or even, you kind of curve the name a little bit on the back if there's not. I believe Spencer Schwellenbach for the Atlanta Braves has his name curved a little more than most because Schwellenbach is such a long name. Nonetheless, that is the story we're being told, so we'll run with that. I have to think that as well produced as the RNC has been for a television event, and remember, Donald Trump is a TV reality star at heart, at his core. That is, he is all about the showmanship. I have to think that they knew that they would get some pushback on the misspelling and wouldn't have let that go unnoticed. That obviously seems to be the story. I have to admit, fact-checking the guy, though, became quite a job after he started to go, finally, off-prompter. He cannot help himself but to go off-prompter. So CNN's Daniel Dale, God bless him, doing the yeoman's work, fact-checking that speech that rambled on for, gosh, what felt like 2 hours. Did it go? It went at least 90. It was forever. Here's Daniel Dale.
Daniel, you've listened to quite a few Trump speeches, and I know that the challenge of being a fact checker in this modern era, especially of President Trump, is one, he says so many things that are not accurate within a short period of time. But two, it's quite frequently you say the same lies or misstatements over and over and over. How did tonight's speech match up?
It was a remarkably long acceptance speech, Jake, and a remarkably dishonest acceptance speech. I counted at least 22 false claims from Donald Trump on first listen. Let's start with one of the wildest claims he made. Listen to what he said about the state of the world when he was president.
The world was at peace. Our opponents inherited a world at peace and turned it into a planet of war. We're in a planet of war. The whole world was at peace, and now the world is blowing up around us.
This is false. Trump did not achieve world peace when he was president, certainly wasn't at peace when he left office. There were active wars or armed conflicts in dozens of nations in 2020, a 51 by one research institution's count, and then 51 again in 2021. Trump handed President Biden ongoing civil wars in Yemen and Syria, of course, an unresolved Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Israeli-Iranian conflict, a war in Ethiopia. I could go on for a while, but I don't have time because there were so many other false claims. So let's address some of those, not even all of them. He repeated his usual lie about Democrats having cheated in the 2020 election. Yep. It's nonsense. He said crime is going up. The opposite is true. It's gone sharply down in 2023 and early 2024, is now lower than it was under Trump in 2020. He said we have the worst inflation we've ever had. Again, not even close. It is 3% right now. The U.S. record is 23.7%. He said there was no inflation under him. It was low, of course, but not non-existent. It was 8% total for his presidency, 1.4% year over year in the month he left office. He said the price of groceries is up 57% under Biden. It's actually 21%. He said Democrats are proposing to quadruple people's taxes. That is imaginary. He said his tax cut was the largest in American history, not even close again. He said the Biden administration does nothing to stop migrants. Well, the administration tried to get Congress to pass a bill to tighten the border, and after Trump himself helped to kill that bill, Biden took executive action to tighten the border. Trump said he stopped human trafficking. Again, not true. He said China stopped buying oil from Iran under him. Also did not happen. He said foreign governments are deliberately sending criminals and mental health patients to the U.S. as migrants. His own campaign has been unable to provide proof for that. I certainly haven't found any myself. He said we defeated ISIS, 100% of ISIS, in a couple of months. In fact, the ISIS caliphate was declared fully liberated more than 2 years into his presidency. And there were other exaggerations about trade with China, about North Korean missile launches, about gas prices, about IRS agents. So it just went on and on and on in terms of falsehood, just like the speech went on and on and on itself.
CNN also seated a panel of 13 undecided voters were asked to give letter grades for the speech. Trump got 2 A's, 5 B's, 4 C's, and 2 D's. So that breaks down to 6 C's, D's, or 7 B's or A's. One of the panelists who gave him a B is married to a young lady who also gave the speech a C. I want you to hear why she gave that grade.
Lena, you gave what grade?
A C.
A C. And Lena and Rich are also married right here.
Yes.
Why'd you give it a C?
Because his rhetoric hasn't changed about the election, 2020 election, and I'm really concerned that we're going to have another issue depending on who wins. So, I'm just really praying that if Trump wins, the guardrails of democracy will hold.
Mm-hmm. Rich, what grade did you give it?
So I gave his speech a D.
Tell me why.
It started out great, but then he went into mistruths and grievances and attacks, and it just totally contradicted itself in terms of what he wanted to achieve with unity.
Paula, the grade you gave it?
D.
And you're supporting Biden?
Yes.
Or whoever takes his place if that happens.
Yes.
What did you think about it?
I think, I do believe he started off with a pretty good tone for him. I thought it was good, but then he lapsed back into the Donald Trump of old.
Okay, up there in the corner, Robin and Kirsten, mother and daughter. The grade you gave it?
I gave it an A.
And why'd you give it an A?
The thing I was looking for was a change, and I felt I heard that change in his voice. I was looking for his discussion on getting unity together in the country, as well as the border control and inflation.
Kirsten, what grade did you give it?
C.
And why?
It started off strong, just like some other people have said, but the same old thing. It went from him probably just reading the teleprompter and actually reciting the speech into his whole song and dance of just putting his own spin on things, and that's where I feel like a lot of his points get lost.
And thus was the summation of the Donald Trump acceptance speech. Undecided voters seemingly still decidedly undecided. 7 going one way, 6 going the other. Obviously, the Democratic National Convention still to come in, about 40 days or so. Lots more to discuss on that front, by the way. I finally broke down, and I'll discuss this a little bit later, I finally broke down and watched J.D. Vance's Hillbilly Elegy. I was not going to read the book, just because in the amount of time that I had yesterday, I had about 2 hours to chill and watch a movie, and so I did. And I pulled up Hillbilly Elegy, and I watched it. My friend Dave Alexander, who has been on this show, is actually in that movie. He is the server, the bartender at the swanky mixer for college students looking for their internships and the white collar folks. He's the one that comes up with the selection of wine that baffles J.D. Vance in the movie. Anyway, kudos, Dave. Got to watch that. I have some thoughts on that after the fact. I actually came away, one, appreciating the movie. I enjoyed the movie. I'm no shame in saying that. I'm not going to sit here and try and let my ideology cloud my judgment. I enjoyed the movie. I thought it was a really cool story. Unfortunately, it's one of those that you can't watch in a vacuum now without having some questions after the fact. And I do have some questions, so I'll weigh in on that a little bit. A little bit of dog whistling, and we'll have to talk a little bit more about what happened before Donald Trump came on stage last night. What between Hulk Hogan, and there's new audio of Hulk Hogan and his racist screed when on a phone call. I guess he didn't realize he was being recorded on. Awkward. Eric Trump, speaking of racism, dog whistling about the names of military bases being changed and why that's important as well. There was Tucker Carlson, Kid Rock's performance. Man, that arena had to smell like the inside of an Axe body spray canister. Oof. Lots of testosterone on display last night. Plenty more to cover here on America One Radio. Please follow the show on your preferred social media platform at Ron Show ETL, Facebook, the Twitter X platform, Instagram, Threads. Show notes as always at RonShowETL.com. Every time I put out an episode, I share everything note-wise that I talk, because I cite my sources, baby. Cite my sources. This little nugget from Eric Trump, who, what did Donald say about his speech? Wow. He was surprised. It was so awkward. Actually, the whole Eric Trump speech was awkward because he was kind of like goading people to clap and applaud when they, I guess, weren't really paying attention to him. It was very awkward. But this little nugget really caught my attention.
You see it on every news station, in every newspaper. You see it in the military. The most iconic military installations on planet Earth are stripped of their identity and renamed. Fort Bragg, Benning, Fort Hood.
Yes, stripped of their identity by way of Confederate military generals, officers. Fort Gordon, by the way, in Georgia, among those, now named Fort Eisenhower. Clearly, everyone knows who Dwight David Eisenhower was, right? Fort Gordon, when it was Fort Gordon, named for Major General John Gordon, who served in the Confederate Army during the Civil War. Also considered one of Robert E. Lee's most trusted generals. After the Civil War, he served as a U.S. Senator and Governor of Georgia, but before then was a Confederate general. Staying in state, Fort Benning was named so to honor Brigadier General Henry Benning, a Georgia lawyer, politician, judge, and supporter of slavery. After Lincoln was elected, Benning became one of the state's most vocal proponents of secession, according to the New Georgia Encyclopedia. Why did we name a military base after this man in 1918? Fort Liberty, previously Fort Bragg, named after what many military scientists would tell you was one of the worst Confederate generals, but still a Confederate general nonetheless. Practiced in Bragg, serving in the Second Seminole War, the Mexican-American War, and the Civil War, but as a Confederate general. Again, why was an American military installation named after a treasonous general? I mean, I can go on and on. Suffice to say that a little bit of a dog whistle there. Why are we still talking about military bases that were named after Confederate generals that have now been renamed? What's done is done, Eric. Sorry, kid. Senator Steve Daines from Montana reminding us that the GOP really doesn't have anything by way of fresh ideas, just going back to old tropes early in last night's convention.
And we're going to build the wall.
Didn't work the first time, but okay. Oh, and
these liberal senators shut down the Keystone Pipeline.
Actually, Keystone XL did that.
And America First majority, we're going to drill, baby, drill.
So we're already drilling more than we ever have before in our nation's history, and not something that the left would even brag about. But you know what? Chris Hayes caught that, I believe, when he was reviewing J.D. Vance's speech the night before anyway, and we covered that pretty extensively yesterday. Honestly, sort of wild that, well, no, it's not. It's just not anymore. We're living in an upside-down world. Journalist, I used air quotes there, Tucker Carlson, brought onto the stage last night to give a speech to the RNC, because that's what journalists do, right? Sean Hannity, of course, has showed up at Trump rallies as well, out there. There's just no pretense with right-wing media anymore of any journalistic integrity or ethics whatsoever. Anyway, this point that he made last night I want to speak on.
You don't see our commander-in-chief suggesting that we use our military to protect our country or the lives of its citizens. No. That's for Ukraine. And it's too much, actually. It's too insulting. It's too insulting. It's a middle finger in the face of every American. It's a very clear statement, which is unmistakable. And that is, we don't care about you.
What he's suggesting is that the U.S. military be used to shoot at, and listen, they've not hidden this, to shoot at, to hang at the southern border and greet folks who are coming to perhaps seek asylum. Actually, shoot first, ask questions later when it comes to immigration policy. That's what he's referring to there. And by the way, using our military in Ukraine is incorrect, just factually incorrect. Our military is not being used in Ukraine. But make no mistake, it is their stated goal to have us completely turn our backs on Volodymyr Zelensky and the people of Ukraine, to let Russia have what I believe it is 17% of Ukraine's country by land. That is, Donald Trump hasn't released how he's going to. He said he's going to end that war immediately, and immediately means to stop supporting Ukraine in any way whatsoever, or leave it up to, I guess, the rest of NATO to do so. And he'd rather just cede 17% of Ukraine's land to the Russian military and his buddy, Vladimir Putin, who, by the way, is bankrupting This is literally the same thing Ronald Reagan did to the Soviet Union, just bankrupting them until they crumbled. That's exactly what is happening as a microcosm in Ukraine right now. The United States, its NATO allies, are trying to hold off the Russian military with Ukraine at the forefront there, defending their own turf. And there are all kinds of accounts coming out of the former Soviet Union and European media outlets reporting that Russia is on the brink of fiscal collapse because they too are spending a ton of money in this war. I mean, listen, you're listening to a child of the 80s. I remember exactly how the Soviet Union cratered. It was literally just us militarily expending ourselves to near exhaustion, essentially to wait them out. This is The Ron Show on America One Radio.
This is The Ron Show on America One Radio.
All right, settle in. Let's go over some of the audio from Trump's acceptance speech last night. I'll just start pretty much where he decided to pivot from the message of unity to calling on Democrats to stop describing him as an enemy of democracy. Stop saying water is wet, people.
And we must not criminalize dissent or demonize political disagreement, which is what's been happening in our country lately at a level that nobody has ever seen before. In that spirit, the Democrat Party should immediately stop weaponizing the justice system and labeling their political opponent as an enemy of democracy. Especially since that is not true. In fact, I am the one saving democracy.
He's going to save democracy. I trying to figure out how that is when he made calls to the Georgia Secretary of State to find votes. That's not saving democracy, sir. This is the party that wanted to stop counting votes in Florida in 2000, but they're going to save democracy. They don't even, first of all, they're quick to point out on the right that we don't live in a democracy, but they're going to save democracy? Sure, trust that. The fake electors scheme, sending a false batch of electors to Congress to try and change the outcome of actual votes of the people at the state level, that does not sound like saving democracy to me. He wants us, by the way, to just drop all charges. Let's just call it a truce. You know what? I'm going to do that next time I get stopped for speeding. You know what, officer? You and I aren't getting along right here. Why don't we just call a truce and you just rip that ticket up? Just do that. I mean, was I speeding? Well, that's irrelevant. We're not getting along. You and I are disagreeing here, and I feel like you're attacking me. You're calling me an enemy of safe driving, and I think that's just violent rhetoric, and it's gonna cause someone undue harm. Officer, just rip that ticket up, and we'll kumbaya. We'll shake hands. We'll have we can pull up the road here and have a meal maybe, and just we'll all feel better about things, right? The crime stuff. There was plenty of lying about the crimes last night. I'm a little creeped out at the calls for pumping patriotism into school kids' brains a little bit.
Our borders will be totally secure. Our economy will soar. We will return law and order to our streets, patriotism to our schools, and importantly, we will restore peace, stability, and harmony all throughout the world.
None of which he was able to do in his first term, but the patriotism in school things is like particularly oogie, creepy. Sorry. I think that's kind of why we are where we are as a country, not understanding our past, not understanding, that there are different paths for different people based on their background, their lineage, their family's financial standing. In fact, I go into a little bit about that in my final thoughts today. As I mentioned, I did finally get around to watching Hillbilly Elegy. And in a vacuum, I really enjoyed it. Good movie. I enjoyed it a lot. But you can't now see it in a vacuum, knowing that this is a J.D. Vance memoir of his upbringing and where he is today. Hang on, I'll get to that. Let me get back to Trump talking about election integrity and how he's going to save democracy. This, again, evoking the big lie.
And we don't have fierce people. We have people that are a lot less than fierce, except when it comes to cheating on elections, and a couple of other things. Then they're fierce.
Wait a minute. We're still talking about the big lie? Are we seriously still talking about the big... We're still talking about the big lie. He has yet to concede 2020, but he wants unity. He wants us to come together on his terms. That's how the GOP is. They want us to come together on their terms and their terms only. No compromise whatsoever. We're Americans. We don't compromise. We don't apologize. Incidentally, we've heard a lot of talk over the last week about incendiary rhetoric, to dialing back the rhetoric. Well, they're not dialing back the rhetoric when it comes to immigration and how there is even a shred of Hispanic American vote for support for this party and this candidate is beyond me. Listen to this last night.
On the wall, we were dealing with a very difficult Congress. And I said, oh, that's okay. We won't go to Congress. I call it an invasion. We gave our military almost $800 billion. I said, I'm going to take a little of that money because this is an invasion. And we built, most of the wall is already built. And we built it through using the funds because what's better than that? We have to stop the invasion into our country that's killing hundreds of thousands of people a year.
First of all, nothing is killing hundreds of thousands of people a year in the U.S. except for, you can't even, well, can you say guns? Can we say hundreds of thousands? We can say tens of thousands. Guns, cancer, COVID under his presidency was killing hundreds of thousands a year. But I want to go to him continually using the term invasion. And let's fast forward, or let's actually go back in time. 2019, when Patrick Wood Crusius entered a Walmart in El Paso, Texas, and in his manifesto spoke to being supportive and inspired by the Christchurch shootings in New Zealand, bemoaning grievances such as environmental degradation, cultural and ethnic replacement, and a, quote, Hispanic invasion. Reading from Wikipedia here, the anti-Hispanic, anti-immigrant manifesto promotes the white nationalist and far-right conspiracy theory called the Great Replacement Theory, often attributed to French writer Renaud Camus. But I think I would actually like to attribute it to the likes of Tucker Carlson and any politician who uses the term invasion when speaking about migration at our southern border. Where's the calls for dialing down the incendiary rhetoric on that? And instead, Donald Trump not only continued to use the term invasion, but also misappropriately stated hundreds of thousands of people being killed because of our immigration policy problems at the southern border. Listen, I'm not even sitting here telling you that we don't have immigration policy problems. Oh, we absolutely do, because we haven't touched our immigration system largely since the 1960s. We're dealing with numbers set in the 1960s that don't apply to modern population numbers, modern issues such as the destabilization of several countries just since the 1960s, a lot of whom we had our hand in. Never mind the climatological issues that now are being felt and we all deal with as a global community in Central and South America since the 1960s. Yeah, no sign of dialing down the inflammatory rhetoric. And remember, after the El Paso shooting, they took no grief from anybody about that either. They didn't want to talk about or look inside and say, you know what, maybe this inflamed rhetoric. We've lost several lives in a mass shooting over this, and maybe we should dial it back. No, none whatsoever. But they want Democrats to stop calling him a threat to democracy. Well, I'm sorry. Last night he also said this.
We had that horrible, horrible result that we'll never let happen again.
What?
The election result, we're never going to let that happen again. They use COVID to cheat.
Wait, what does that mean?
Never going to let it happen again.
Now, you'd like to think that what he means by that is what the Republicans have really been busy doing for the last 3+ years in enacting legislation at the state and federal level to make it harder to vote when in 2020, because of the COVID pandemic, we did everything we could as a country to try and make it easier for folks to vote without having to stand in long lines in person in the midst of a pandemic when, there was COVID roiling through the population anytime we were all hanging out in masses, like showing up at a rally where somebody like, I don't know, a former presidential candidate and supporter of the then president came and died after contracting COVID. Rest in peace, Herman Cain. Something else I want to point out, he went back to the black jobs thing. Okay, doubling down on a meme that folks had a lot of fun with on social media, TikTok, et cetera, and so on after this.
By the way, you know who's taking the jobs that are created? 107% of those jobs are taken by illegal aliens.
107%.
And you know who's being hurt the most by millions of people pouring into our country? The black population and the Hispanic population, because they're taking the jobs from our black population, our Hispanic population.
Okay, first of all, he admits that we're creating jobs, so that's a plus. I don't know where 107%, how does 107% work? Why is it that the jobs that folks who are coming in who are untrained or undereducated, undertrained for work, why are those black jobs or Hispanic jobs? Again, the dog whistling folks, it's what he's not saying. Actually, no, it's very much what he's saying that you need to pay attention to. This is insulting, and he just doubled down on it. But I'm not surprised. When you go off prompter, Donald is a sight to be seen and to be heard, no doubt about it. Speaking of jobs and job creation, however, you can forget all of the green energy jobs that have come from the Biden transition and presidency because...
And all of the trillions of dollars that are sitting there not yet spent, we will redirect that money for important projects like roads, bridges, dams, and we will not allow it to be spent on meaningless green new scam ideas.
There goes Elon's truck. Solar energy.
And I will end the electric vehicle mandate on day one.
Oop. Sorry, Elon.
Thereby saving the U.S. auto industry from complete obliteration, which is happening right now, and saving U.S. customers thousands and thousands of dollars per car.
Electric cars now, hybrid vehicles are on par, about as affordable as the gas guzzlers are. And oh, by the way, there, of course, are federal subsidies for purchasing those vehicles. So many lies just kept rolling out of this man's mouth that the more the speech went on, the more he went off prompter, the more he started losing his grip on that admittedly powerful first few minutes when he began the speech with a tone, a touchier tone, and paying homage to the retired fireman who lost his life shielding his family at his rally from the crazed AR-15 wielding 20-year-old man who got the gun from his dad, who apparently had been pretty supportive of gun rights and had Trump flags in the yard all along. But again, Democrats, you need to stop calling this guy a threat, an existential threat to democracy, because clearly he's telling us last night that he's not just a threat to democracy. He is a weapon against democracy, and he plans on going full bore at it once reelected. We've got to get our act together. Democrats are still trying to figure out who our nominee is going to be, and the clock is ticking. We'll keep watching that. All right. So I got to tell you about my watching the movie Hillbilly Elegy, my J.D. Vance revelation. We'll do that when the Ron Show returns here in just a couple. On the American One Radio app, AmericanOneRadio.com, on demand at ProgressiveVoices.com, or wherever you podcast. Final segment of the show for the day and for the week. Hope you have a nice weekend lined up. We have cooler weather here in the Atlanta area for the weekend. I'm a little perplexed by it. Like today's high, 83. I mean, I guess it's going to rain all day today. Tomorrow's high, 83. Sunday, 80. It's perplexing. I have, let's see, I've got a friend coming in to visit this weekend. I've got a lot on my plate, actually. Got a friend coming in to visit this weekend, hosting an open house for a listing that I have in Gwinnett County as well. So, sorry, Will, you're either coming with or, yeah, actually you're coming with, because after that, I have, can I say this on my podcast? I have an event. I can't say what it's for, but it's like a You know what? I can't say what it's for because she might be listening. Anyway, so I have a party to go to Saturday night. Sorry, Will, you're going with me to that too. My buddy Will is like a former radio intern and an employee who worked with me in radio. No, he's not. We're not. No, it's not that. He's straight. Just good friends. Think of the world of that man, and we haven't seen each other in a long time. He's a big St. Louis Cardinals fan. That's why he's coming into town. And so we're going to try and see a game tonight. Lunch with my friends, a game tonight, get up tomorrow, open house, head to Augusta for a party, and then I guess come back here and chill. And God, man, catch our breath a little bit because that's a lot for one day and a half of time here. So, yeah, whatever you're doing this weekend, I hope you have a lot of downtime or relaxation or some fun things planned. It looks like it's going to rain a good bit here this weekend. I always tell people when it's going to rain in Metro Atlanta, the thing to do is immediately afterwards, although there's rain in the forecast through next week, immediately afterwards is to take a day, go hike Cloudland Canyon. After a good bit of rain, Cloudland Canyon is, well, first of all, it's a great park anyway, and it's tucked away in the very northwest corner, I speak for a living, of Georgia. But after rain, you go into the canyon. The waterfalls are incredible. Incredible. I love me some mountains, and I love me Cloudland Canyon as well. Speaking of mountains, I finally got around to watching Hillbilly Elegy. That is, of course, the J.D. Vance memoir turned into a Ron Howard film. Knowing it, like, I kind of feel bad that I didn't watch this before the elevation of J.D. Vance into the political lexicon, because I'd like to have just, graded the movie internally in a vacuum. I spoke a little bit about this on a Facebook and Twitter X thread, at Ron Show ATL if you want to read it, by the way. Here's what I said about this. I can appreciate quality film and a good story. I wish I'd watched it in a vacuum, but given the week's political headlines, that's not possible. So, here we are. On its own, I'd say it's a really good movie. How truthful it was or embellished, I'll leave that to others. Still now, it bothers me, and here's why. Follow along. What I'm trying to understand is why we're rightfully tugged on to be sympathetic, empathetic even, to the plight of the poor white working class, addled with addiction and economic despair, when any such similar story from a marginalized perspective is deemed woke and summarily shunned or altogether dismissed as Hollywood liberals preaching at anyone who'll watch, trying to indoctrinate us. What I'm really taken aback by is a, again, rightful victimhood of a people by the likes of plant closures, pharmaceutical companies cranking out addictive painkillers and knowingly doing so and hiding it, a general lack of opportunity for the poor, the struggle of healthcare costs and coverage. And this week we learn that all that grievance gets wrapped up in a young man who's eloquently told his story about that struggle as he accepts the nomination to be a vice presidential running mate. Not just any running mate, though. He's now the running mate of a con man who's jilted so many working class folks over several decades. To be second in command for a party that's coddled the big coal industry that's imprisoned Appalachia. The Appalachia that this young man wants us all to feel empathy for. Second in command for a party that's coddled and protected Big Pharma for decades. A party that's protected American-owned businesses from backlash for outsourcing jobs. Never mind the party occupying the White House 20 of the 30 years that this country lost 17 million of those manufacturing jobs. No argument for me. J.D. Vance was right to point out how much this country's been screwed over its white working class and poor folks. Conservative-minded voters should hear more of these stories and from varying perspectives. The problem is they tend to shun similar stories because of the color of the faces on those movie posters. It's my sincere belief that the difference between the left and the right is that the left listens and empathizes with just about every perspective and works to make meaningful change. Now listen, I say just about every perspective because I'd argue we're not listening enough to the plight of the Palestinian enough right now, but I'll save that for another diatribe. Vance's story isn't as unique as those who loved his memoir may believe it to be. J.D., however, somehow, inexplicably, didn't turn to the left either. To me, that's the most perplexing part of this elegy. Instead, he's embraced a role atop the party that's shown itself time and time again to be opposed to addressing any of the ills that hillbilly elegy, or Boys in the Hood, Hale County This Morning, This Evening, Mudbound, The Hate You Give, I Am Not Your Negro, The Sentence, We the Animals, Cesar's Last Stand, Walkout, Tortilla Soup, to name a few, address. Last night, I wrote this yesterday, he addressed his party bemoaning the scars of unpopular wars the party he seeks to guide to the White House impassionately pushed us into. He reminded us of the working class American struggles through a manufacturing malaise his party oversaw most of, in hopes of defeating an incumbent who's actually turned the manufacturing job losses around in 3+ years. I can't sit quietly and not say something, and none of the rest of us should either. The J.D. Vance, and Mamaw too, I really like Mamaw, in the movie, a likable, honorable person. The Vance that wanted no part in a Trump era of his party. Remember we've heard all the audio of the things that he said about Donald Trump just years ago in the infancy of the Trump takeover of the party. You know what? That J.D. Vance, I could have a beer with that guy. I mean, we wouldn't agree on a whole lot politically, but I'd at least be sitting down and having a beer with an honorable sort nonetheless. The J.D. Vance of 2024 seems like an altogether different, alternate universe version of the character that I watched the movie about and come to respect in the 116 minutes that I spent getting to learn of his early story. You have to understand, and by the way, I'm done with the reading here. You have to understand, I grew up in a, I would say suburban, but it was kind of a rural suburban community. Grovetown was not the suburb that it is now, choked with traffic and cookie cutter subdivisions galore. Grovetown was kind of a rurally, struggling-y community. And you had two tracks essentially in Grovetown. You were either military, former military, and doing okay, living a good life. There was no manufacturing in Grovetown. Anybody who lived in Grovetown that had work essentially was commuting into Augusta. There wasn't a whole lot of retail. There wasn't any manufacturing. There really wasn't even any farming in Grovetown at that point in time. I say all this because I went to high school in neighboring Harlem, a smaller town. We had to share a high school because, again, we were kind of a rurally part of the suburban county, Columbia County. I know the mindset behind the J.D. Vance's and the J.D. Vance story. And I know a lot of conservatives that I've grown up with over time. Some that I would say are still friends of mine from high school. Some that I don't speak to anymore because I'm flabbergasted at the difference, at the hypocrisy of their mindset politically. When I think about Austin Rhodes, my radio compadre down in Augusta, who listens to this show all the time, and I get angry at him sometimes because, like, I know the goodness of people like him and what's in their heart, and then I see just the mental yoga, the Pilates that they go through to explain their position while ignoring how that position can be attributed to people other than just their kind, and the lengths that they'll go to apologize, not even apologize, but just to explain away or spin away their adoration for a man, again, the nominee of their party, who exhibits none of the traits, none of the values that I've been taught over the last 40 years that they and their party hold dear. I'm flabbergasted by it, and I'm rightfully concerned that the takeover of a party becomes the takeover of the country, and that all that we hold dear as Americans gets lost over these next 4 years. Which is why I don't care who's atop the Democratic Party ticket. I'm going to work my ass off to ensure that that person stops that guy from being president again. Show notes, RonShowATL.com, at RonShowATL on all our social media platforms. Back here Monday, 9 a.m. on America One Radio. See you then.